Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Planning Your T-Level Transition Programme for Progression to T-Level. As people are entering the room, if you would just be so kind as to just check that the name that you've got this on your display is how you want to be referred to. And if you could put your college in as well, or your school, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So I'm Paul Croft. You'll have met me before, I'm fairly sure, Senior Project Manager for T-Level and T-Level Transition Programs. Bit of housekeeping, if you can just keep your microphones off, cameras off while we're in the main room. And if you've got any questions, do type it in the chat. We've got a big Q&A session coming up later, so it'd be great to get lots of questions in as you go along, but please use the chat, and that'll be good. So today then, let's look at what to expect. Next slide, please. It's going to be focusing on progression. It's a good time of year to do that in your planning cycles. You've still got a little bit of time to think about how these links are going to work onto T-Level. Next slide, please. And we'll do that via looking at a range of approaches to ensure that your curriculum is maximising progression opportunities, and then tying that into the framework and how that makes a difference on how you plan for progression. And next slide, please. And that'll look a bit like this. We'll have a few words from Frank from the DFE, and then we'll move on to Steve at the AOC that will just do a little bit of kind of schema activation, find out what your thinking is about progression, and then we'll talk through some best practice findings. And then you've got a double header actually in your main presentation today. You've got both Matt and Rich from Cirencester to talk to you about how they go about it. And then this is the opportunity after that to ask them plenty of questions and really to delve into their experience and expertise as an early adopter of these programs. And then we'll finish off the day with just some key dates, some events that are coming up, and then just a little evaluation and what have you. So good day, shouldn't be longer than an hour. It won't be longer than an hour, in fact, it won't. So to start with then, let me just introduce you to Frank McGloin from the DFE. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Paul said, my name is Frank McGloin. I work for the T-Level Transition Programme Delivery Team for the Department for Education, so I'm really happy to welcome you all to the event today. This is the latest event in the excellent series of events that AOC have delivered throughout this academic year, and it's one obviously that from the department's perspective it's an aspect of the T-Level Transition Programme that we are particularly interested in terms of progression to the T-Level, which is ultimately what the T-Level Transition Programme is about. It's, as you all know, it's about preparing students so that they can be fully prepared to go on to the next level of the journey, to go on to T-Level. Looking forward to listening to Matt Reynolds and Rich Stonebridge from Cirencester College, who I know are extremely great ambassadors for the T-Level Transition Programme, and we'll be able to give people lots of good inside information and knowledge on how they've taken things forward over the last few years of delivery. So with that said, enough from me. Look forward to hearing from you all also during this next hour, and I hope you all really enjoy it, and I hope you get a lot of value, and it's really useful and informative for yourselves in developing your own programs and taking them forward. Thanks. And over to you, Steve.
Thanks very much, Frank. Abby, if I could just have the next slide, please. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Waterston. I'm the manager of the T-Level and the T-Level Transition Programme project at the Association of Colleges. So it's nice to be here and to see everybody today. Abby, if you could go on to the next slide, please. So before we get into the webinar proper, we're just going to do a quick activity just to capture some views and so on. So this is going to be using Menti. Now, people who have been at webinars before, we use Menti. So two ways you can join the Menti presentation. You can go to www.menti.com, and then when asked to join the presentation, the code's on the screen there, 2192863. Alternatively, if you've got a smartphone or another device with you, you can scan that QR code and that will take you immediately to the Menti presentation. So join the Menti. Abby, if I could just share my screen so that we can we can go on to have a look at the Menti. Okay, so it's not working. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll just run Menti from here. So I've got 11 people on the screen. So I've I'll read out the answers. You'll have to apologise, accept my apologies that we can't see this on screen. But we've got Shooter Hill Sixth Form College, three from Shooters Hill. So we've got a lot from Shooters Hill. We've got Silent Sister. We've got Oldham College. We've got Richard McRae, afternoon Richard. We've got Miles Brown. So we've got a selection of different providers who have joined us today. So I'm going to move to the next question. So this question is, how confident are you in planning your transition programme to enable progression to the T-level? So first one came in at not at all. So we've got a slightly. Okay, so we're in the process of people just putting the answers in, and we've got people who are slightly confident, and we've got people who are not at all confident, and nobody at all is saying that they're very confident in the progression. So hopefully, then stuff from that you pick up today will help you move from either not at all to slightly, or slightly towards very. So we'll look at we'll look at trying to move you up that scale as we go through the event. Okay, so next one is to type in an answer here. What aspect of your programme do you think will prepare the students best for progression? And that should say your programme and not you programme. So what aspect of your programme do you think will prepare students best for progression? So feel free to put something in there. So I'll read them out as they come in, because you're not able to see my screen. So we've got mirroring T-levels. So mirroring T-levels will help. We've got work readiness, academic study skills, numeracy and literacy, focus on skills development rather than simply prepping for exams. Well, we'll probably talk a bit about that later as well. Preparation for teaching, English, maths, skills work readiness. It's the content of a level 2 course and the inclusion of digital English and maths and placement, employment skills, study skills, industry placement. Science, okay, a good one there. I think just looking across there very, very quickly, no surprise really, but most of the answers are focusing on either the work experience and employment skills, or looking at skills other than just the pure content of the transition program, which is very, very pleasing. It's not just passing a qualification as other courses might be. So that's quite pleasing and quite interesting. And I'm sure when you hear the presentation from the provider, that they'll be touching on these things too. So the last slide from me is what is your biggest challenge? There's a silence at the minute because there's no answers coming. Oh, somebody's come in. I just didn't wonder if anybody didn't have any challenges. That was why. So we've got knowing recruitment numbers. We've got recruitment coming up again. Planning properly, knowing what to put into the course and why. Well, again, hopefully picking up things there. I'll give it a couple of minutes or so, but I've got time to prepare as we would like, and recruitment and promotion, enrolment. So a big sort of consensus there in and around recruitment and enrolment, how to design a program, accessibility for the less able student to be able to transition to the T level. Interesting one, and I'm again hopefully we'll pick up things from the presentation. Again, we've got recruitment, work readiness and employers involved, understanding of T levels. So we've got a variety there. Probably the most common that are in and around recruitment and enrolment and sort of working in and around there. So I'm going to ask Abby to share her screen again, and I'm going to share some top tips. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share some top tips based on our intelligence that we've gathered from our kit meetings that we've had with a number of different providers. And Abby, if you could move to the next slide, please. That'd be great. Thank you. So in terms of the T-level transition program, so I mean, Matt will tell you, will probably tell you his journey, but it started in September 2020 with providers. So currently there are 141 providers nationally who are delivering or planning to deliver a T-level transition program. So that's up to and including those that are planning to deliver in September this year. So that's quite a number of providers, and the AOC is working or has worked with each and every one of these providers. So the top tips that we're picking up from and the information that we're able to share based on the evidence that we've gathered from these providers. Abby, if we could just pass on to the next one. So in terms of good practice themes, providers report that they feel the framework for delivery and the national technical outcomes are positive as they give a degree of standardisation across the programmes, but it also allows providers to retain a flexible approach to suit individual circumstances. Now, without exception, most the providers said this, and there wasn't any difference between providers who were using a qualification and who weren't using a qualification, or who were using a creative mix of non-regulated qualifications. So it was across the board that the providers felt that this was a positive. The majority of providers who are delivering or planning to deliver are using a qualification within the technical and skills component. So, I don't. I mean, there's people on here. Your programs will be in the process of being planned. The majority of you will be planning to put in a qualification into the technical and skills component of the transition program. One of the things that has emerged through our work with the round 1, the round 2, the round 3 providers is that close links between the T-level and the transition program are being planned and being early in the program, and these have an impact on students' progression to the T-level. So we've got providers who are running or planning to run collaborative sessions with T-level and transition program students. So collaborative maybe in terms of working alongside the same employers. We've got other providers who are using collaborative sessions with students working on a same or a similar project and a series of projects. We've got providers who are using T-level, slightly watered down T-level content as a bridging content towards the end of their transition program. We've got providers who are pairing T-levels and transition program students in a buddying or a mentoring initiative. We've got providers who are timetabling the same staff to teach T-level and transition program. And we've got providers who are planning for students to work together on things like route-based projects and simulated projects. So where you can, it's it's evidence that's emerged. It's good practice where you can, trying to create these links between the T-level and the transition program throughout the transition program to allow the transition program students to aspire to that T-level. Route-based projects involving employer engagement in design, assessment, and being linked to the T-level employership projects are becoming more common. So it's, and it is that employer involvement and the linking to the T-level again. It's not the writing of a generic project. It's that employer involvement or with an eye to the T-level. And finally, for me, preparing students for the T-level assessment methods, and providers are putting in different forms of assessment into the transition program in order to help the students to prepare. So, for example, we have providers who are writing their own exams for the transition program to prepare for T-level assessment. We've got providers who are using project qualifications to meet the national technical outcomes. We've got providers who are planning the use of a synoptic assessment. We've got providers who are using assessment of the work experience and the study skills, as well as qualifications in order to judge success. And we've got providers who are looking at using some form of endpoint assessment to allow the students to sort of sum up everything that they've done in order to progress through onto the T-level. So there's a variety of different things there. Sort of top tips, quick tour of top tips. I'm sure Matt and Rich are going to touch on some of these because their program is a good program, and I'm sure they're going to touch on that. So I'll stop talking and I'll pass over to Matt. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Steve. Really appreciate that. Could I have the first slide, please, Abby? So yeah, my name is Matt Reynolds and I'm from Cirencester College. I'm vice principal there, and I'm also joined today by my friend Rich Stonebridge, who's our associate principal here and has also been absolutely a key partner here at the college in the design and construction of our transition program. So we've worked together on developing and building this program, and so I'm really thrilled to do this with Rich. We were working out the other day, actually, was the last time we did a presentation, like tag teamed one together. We've done a couple of like film things like this, but we think it was probably about 17 years ago when we actually did a tag team presentation. So anything can happen. Anyway. Yeah. So to start off with, really, what I'm going to do is just share, what we're both going to do is share with you some of our experience in building a TLTP program, but also how to make it relevant and work, as the title said. And really, this is about designing something that is able to connect with young people who perhaps haven't had the success that they'd hoped in school. And it is ultimately always focused on this concept of designing something that's going to help students progress into a T-level. That's really the kind of the key objective, if you like. And we're going to share with you, some of our approaches of things that we've tried. We're on I think our 4th year of transition now, and it's a constantly evolving beast. And we've made mistakes, we've learned an awful lot with it. And we've built a pretty neat program, we think, with the way we work it now. So we'll share what we do, and then hopefully it might be helpful if you're in the middle of designing your own scheme. Could I have the next slide, please? So firstly, just to give you a bit of context, obviously there's a map of the UK there, just a bit if you're wondering where we are. We're not in London where the red square is. If you could just give me a click there, Abby. That's us, Cirencester. So we're in the southwest, in the sort of north of the southwest, as a place for our college, Cirencester in Gloucestershire. If you just give me another click, Abby. Where most people think of the West Country and Cirencester in Gloucestershire, this is the type of thing you might be familiar with, these sort of chocolate box style villages and all of that sort of thing. But I'm just trying to give you a bit of context really with this as a college. It's not quite like, some of it's like that, but it's not quite the same as that. If you could just give me another click there, Abby, that'd be great. Thank you. So this is my college. This is our college, Cirencester College, just on the outskirts of the town of Cirencester. And as you can see, we are a rural college. We have, it's literally a 5-minute walk into our town, but our setting is very much in the countryside. So for us, we have a whole bunch of issues there, really, usually about transportation, and particularly when it comes to things like work placement and people being able to get around in the countryside, because the travel infrastructure is not fantastic in the countryside. So, even if you have a bursary to travel, there might not be a bus for you to actually get on to get to where you need to get to. So although it looks a kind of idyllic setting, in many ways it comes with its own particular issues. We are a non-selective college. We generally have people need collections of grade 4s at GCSE for our various level 3 programs. We have about 3,000 students in the college at any one time. About 60% of our provision is for A level and about 40% is for technical and vocational. So that just gives you a feel for kind of what we look like and what we do. And I'm currently sat in that very low slung building in the middle that looks like a little bit like a hard drive. I'm in there, and then Rich is in his huge office, which is in one of the taller buildings and another part of the campus. Can I have the next slide, please, Abby? So just to give you some context on our catchment as well, there's Cirencester there in the centre. And we have a catchment area which extends over about 60 miles if you were to draw a big hoop around us. And although we have that rural countryside setting that I showed you in the slide previously, our catchment actually encompasses some of the bigger cities of Swindon and Gloucester and Cheltenham, and then down as far as sort of North Bristol, Yate. So we have some big urban areas that feed into the college. We bus everybody in every day to come into us, and also some of the postcode areas that we that we have students come from in particularly in Swindon and Gloucester. Some of those areas are in the top 10% of deprived postcode areas in the UK. So although it looks very idyllic in some of the pictures, actually we have a lot of the same issues that we deal with as a sixth form college as everybody else will be sort of familiar with. But that essentially gives you a bit of context of what we are, where we're from, and what we work with. So if I could just look at the next slide and have a little look at T level. And I think, why did we decide to do T level? We're a Wave 1 college, so we got involved with working with T level very much from the sort of early doors. And even when T level as a concept was being discussed, we were involved in some of the very early meetings where the DFE was kind of deciding on what's a T level going to be like and how we're going to roll it out. So we've been involved for some time. And I think for us, one of the things that was, why did we get involved and why did we decide to do it? I think for us, it was a very brand new approach to technical education. And it also involved a huge amount of embedding the qualification in with employers, which was particularly exciting. And I think we were aware of continental styles of teaching technical education, which felt much more robust and industry relevant to us. And we're keen to look at how we might work with employers in different ways. There's also T-Level offered a really excellent vehicle for us to be able to respond to the strategy requirements that come from our local enterprise partnerships. And increasingly now the new LISP framework, there are certain demands for our region of skills that are required, and the T-Level is a superb kind of answer to that. And also they're very much up to the minute as a qualification. So the list I've got there are some of the types of aspects of T-Level we found particularly attractive. The opportunity to collaborate, independent thinking, the type of learner that you produce out of a T level, out of doing a T level, and particularly with that focus on professional skills and how they develop as individuals. They're just a fantastic vehicle for providing a talent pipeline, as people used to say, to employers for sure. There's a definite way as well where we get this feedback loop occurring from experience in the workplace, linking back to what's being taught in the classroom and vice versa. So there's a genuine kind of opportunity to do some very good developmental work. I've already said about them being up to the minute, very real world, and the opportunity to build a high value workforce. But ultimately, this gold standard as well, with there's so much variety and breadth of vocational education on offer, and this chance to produce a gold standard technical qualification was again really attractive for us. So that's why we decided to get involved. We really like the look of them. Can I have the next slide, please, Abby? So the issue, of course, is what if your students are not ready yet? So most students who are in school are going to be have their mindset, if they're going to do a T level, they're going to have their mindset on doing a T level. And so at the moment, their point of progression, what they're interested in is going to college. Say you're going to do construction, for example, they're imagining they're going to come to college and do a construction T level. And so what then happens if school doesn't work out and they open their results on results day and they haven't quite hit the scores they were hoping for? Typically what happens with the college is you roll up on enrollment day and you say, I didn't quite get what I hoped. And you get taken to a little room on the side and they say, right, let's have a conversation with a tutor and see what we've got that we can offer you and so on. And there's a rather sort of odd process happens of trying to find something that fits. Whereas what we found with transition programs in particular, that they are bespoke designed to get people into T level. They offer the perfect vehicle in many respects to get students ready. So one of the things we found is you cannot rerun the school year. The idea of taking it together, a collection of GCSEs or running a standard sort of springboard type program and sort of rewrapping it and calling it your transition program is really not going to cut it with T level. So what you do need to do is kind of rethink your approach and design a genuine study program essentially to create the right sort of opportunities for your students. There's also, I often quote this when Kath Cezanne said a long time ago that no level 2 was ever designed with T level in mind. And that's I often repeat that one. I think that's so true. So if you're wrapping up your old GCSEs to be your transition program, there will be elements that in there that may well be useful, but that GCSE was not designed with T level in mind. So one of our key things is to look at the end point. What do you want to produce that is going to create the student you want in your T level? And in reality, it's often about the competency of what can they actually do rather than subject knowledge to a degree. There's a certain amount of designing a student who is a very capable and competent student. And so when you start thinking about what you would like them to eventually be able to do, you really start thinking about how am I going to design something completely new rather than a rehash of old level 2 programs. And this is the bit where I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of transition, you need to do something new, but you're not quite sure what it needs to look like. Can I have the next slide, please, Abby? So one of the key things I would say is bear in mind that these are study programs you can create. It doesn't have to be all wrapped around qualifications. Now, we very much very keen to go down the non-qual route. We have a very minimal qualifications that our students do, and Rich will talk through the design of the program in a moment, but we're interested in designing a study program, like a wrapper as a whole that goes around the full-time program that a student does to prepare them for what they actually need to do when they're doing their T level. And I think this required sort of new thinking from us, and it also required us to think up a whole load of different types of experience that students could have in the program that was going to be helpful for T level. And the reason I say, can I look through a new lens, is often in trying to design a program, you look through the lens of what you know naturally. You try to rationalize what's required through your own experience and what you know. And actually, the things we found most successful is when I think that Rich and I have just kind of sat down and blown the whole thing to pieces and really gone into the core of what we need students to do and invented something new from scratch. And I think that's where some of our best ideas have come from, when we've sort of parked our old way of doing things and been kind of brave enough, if you like, to think about designing something new. Okay, have the next slide, please, Abby. Now, this is kind of from your framework. This is like a draft of the various sort of principles of what should be in a transition program. Abby, if you could click through, there's a load of red hoops that pop up until we get the last red hoop, which comes up over the bit that says right decision at the bottom. And this is I think one more. That's it. So I think what we had here is in identifying, you know, what should be in your T-level transition program. So much is about creating the right opportunities, behaviors, and skills within students, so that they can develop one, a sense of ownership about what they're doing, and two, feel sort of fully integrated in their programs. It's about reinforcing their confidence and enabling them to make the right decisions. That's an interesting kind of collection of themes there, but really they're often about motivation, creating positive behaviors, a sense of ownership about what they're doing, and finding these complementary skills. Now, remember, this is a student that thought they were doing a T-level. So if you find you're not able to get on that T-level program, your transition program has to still answer to some of their kind of hunger for their aspirational topic, if you like. So in designing your transition program, if I go back to that construction student, there needs to be construction elements within that transition program that are meaningful, that allow them to develop all of these things highlighted here, to make it relevant and meaningful for them. Can I have the next slide, please, Abby? Again, this just nicely sort of summarizes the key areas of knowledge, but and skills. But I think one of the interesting things to observe is that it really boils down a lot of these components are about skills and behavior. And then there's technical knowledge, but skills associated with that knowledge as well. It's fascinating how much employers are interested in skills more than knowledge often. I think if you have a student who's skillful and able to work effectively and is confident and can ask questions when they're stuck and can problem solve and can manage their time effectively, all of these types of life skills, if you like, an employer will say, give me one of those. I can teach them anything I need to teach them, but give me somebody who has all those sort of core skills built in. And so I think this is really opportunity to give somebody those skills to make it work. Next slide, please. So here's one, just a heads up, really, if you're in the middle of designing your transition program, thinking what it's going to be, as a quick aside, really, is that as a college, or if you're in a management team, or if you're in charge of a particular area, is be aware, are your teachers able to do what you're asking them to do? So often in a level 2 program, you're dealing with a certain core of level 2 specialists, but you might also typically in an FE environment have teachers that are teaching some level 2 because they're down on hours, or they need to, you know, pick up something else and so on. So you end up with a core of specialists and then a kind of satellite staff around that have sort of best intentions, but might not have chosen to teach level 2 deliberately. And one of the things we've put a lot of effort in is trying to curate this kind of core of group of teachers who are specialists in teaching at level 2. And obviously with staff rotation isn't always easy, and we still got to get this like fully right. But I would say in designing a program from scratch, that's where most teachers feel anxious. And the reason they feel anxious is when you start with a blank sheet of paper, that can be something quite new. Most teachers generally are quite used to revising a scheme of work or a plan. You know, a new specification has an update that needs revisions. Not many people have designed a course from scratch. And I think the work that we put into, and Rich and myself working together in designing the program at different stages, is basically, if you invest in getting people on board and getting them up to speed with what to do, give them the confidence to be able to try new things and develop a full study program, it really helps. Whereas I think if you just give it to your existing staff and say, design me a program, it might be something that they're not particularly familiar with. So I would just say as an aside, make sure your teachers are ready and they're up to scratch to have the skills and the training they need to be able to do it. Okay, can I have the next slide, please, Abby? Okay, so as far as building the package, now Rich is going to take you through our sort of our model that we've come up with and we've developed over time, and it's still in development. But I just wanted to refer quickly back to those T-level themes before we go. As I said, in building a program, we had to think broader than just trying to think of a bunch of qualifications that might be useful or find some level 2 things that might be relevant to a T-level and so on. All of these things that we have, I've got listed down there on the left-hand side, with those sort of elements that are part of being a T-level student. If you could give me the next click, please, Abby. And then if you actually look at how these like manifest themselves, really, for a student to be able to collaborate effectively, it requires a lot of confidence, actually, and experience immersion in the workplace. Independent thinking, again, is about ways of operating, study skills you might have, professional practice, and so on. You can see a recurring theme, though, that is running through these elements which pop up that are so good about T-level. It's about confidence, professionalism, having the correct experience, and having a way that you operate yourself, a way you go about your business, and being trained and taught like how to do it. How can you be a really, really effective student? And I think this combination of skills and professional practice has been key in how we've kind of designed our program. Anyway, I'll hand you over to my buddy Rich, who will take you through the outline package of kind of how we've modeled it.
Thanks, Matt. I think that those last 2 slides for me are probably, can we just go back one, please? I think one of the things I would say is those last 2 slides are the ones that really, really resonate with me. Is that I work with a lot of course leaders in designing this package, designing their schemes of work. And you can see, looking at those collaborations, those independent thinking, all those sort of things, not once do we talk about a specification or the qualification or anything like that. We're talking about developing people. And whenever we started, or I can remember back when Matt gave me an A4 lever arch folder with a couple of pieces of paper in it. Rich, I've got a lovely project for you. And we talked about transition. Is that actually what we were talking about? Is we started with that learner. And Matt touched on it, is that, 75% of our learners come in slightly disillusioned, under a cloud of disappointment. They haven't got what they're looking for. They haven't got what they want. In terms of program of study, hopefully this resonates with lots of people, but 43% of them need to do maths, 64 need to be able to do a redo in their English, 24% doing both, a range of complex needs as well. We've got over a third need exam access arrangements, 41% with declared health needs. I think this resonates with a lot of people. Whenever I deliver this to level 2 teachers, is I get a lot of nodding and they're going, yeah, that's who we're talking about. And if we start with the learner and we start with what they need from us and understand their perspective, that they do have this disappointment, they do potentially have some disillusionment with education potentially as a whole, I think that leads us into why we've chosen this particular package moving forwards in this particular design. If I could have the next slide, please. So we can see that you'll see this resonates with some of the guidance and those sort of things in there in terms of the diagnostics and guidance period. Retakes, do we take retakes early? Do we wait and see and develop those skills? I'll talk about maths and English in slightly more detail a bit later, and you can see that there's that digital theme that runs through it as well. But what I wanted to talk about was if you just look at the next slide, please. So that bottom bit that we're talking about is the bit where we do a lot of design. We know that we need to do maths and English. We know we need to include digital skills in there, but in our design of the transition program, we modeled massively across the T levels. So our work experience versus classroom is an 80-20 split. We have HPQ specialism, so that's about a project qualification which has the equivalency of a GCSE, which is quite important to us. One, because actually that's what employers have said that they want. We go out and they say, you know, work qualifications are a given for us, is that what we want is students who are innovative, can come up with a project, be creative, see it through to the end, and then review it and come back to it. Well, that's project management in a nutshell, isn't it? And those skills development and in terms of developing those skills, we use things like case studies, those sort of employer set projects that you not so complicated as you get in T levels, but some elements of those as well. And then you've got the national technical outcomes. The way we tick those off at the moment is that we have a very small vocational qualification, which is often equivalency of about one GCSE as well. And then we use the project qualification at the end of that as well to pick up any technical outcomes that we've been missing. When we did the first iteration of this, we had a huge amount of freedom, and that was amazing in terms of being really, really creative. It brought its own issues with a lot of teachers not necessarily being used to having that amount of freedom and knowing how to evidence or cover off those technical outcomes without having a qualification to hang their hat on. And that was something that I've been quite keen to protect, that creativity. But actually the national technical outcomes now give us a framework that we can work towards as well. But what I would say to you is make sure that you ask your teachers not to lose that creativity, because that's how you make it bespoke to your particular area. If I give you, for instance, just down the road, we've got a rather large donut in GCHQ. So digital cyber skills are really important for us to embed within our transition as well. Can I have the next slide, please? Or click, sorry. So maths and English, you can, sorry, yeah, thank you, sorry. So maths and English, obviously hugely prominent in our program of study, but also is that embedding and contextualizing maths and English. This is a work in progress. We've done a huge amount of work in both maths and English about trying to decode that and put those maths and English skills and make them relevant to our learners. You know, ratios are important if you're teaching childcare as much as they're important in terms of the mix of muck going on for a builder. It's important for them to understand it, but understand it within their context. When we're talking about persuasive writing or transactional writing in English, it's important that students understand that's very, very important in terms of marketing, but also in the way in which we provide the register of our writing, if we're writing to parents in childcare, or if we're pulling together a sort of a workflow for somebody to follow. We try and use that language, that lexicon that is common to the GCSE maths, and try and map as much as we can. Don't get too bogged down in that, but where we can, really, really highlight those skills as much as physically possible. In terms of our tutoring program, we very much follow the VESPA sort of model and really try and instill into the students about, especially around their visioning of where they're going next and what they're going to be moving on to. We have lots and lots of students who, and let's go back to that very first bit I was talking about, 75% of our students don't quite know where, you know, they come under that cloud of disappointment. We do have some movement in there for students to be able to pick and choose where they go because of the way we designed this model, and it's that wrapper that Matt was talking about earlier, rather than that specific qualifications moving forwards. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we really focus on is that we talk about students not having that, reframing their self-perceptions. And how do we do that? You know, their academic confidence quite often is on the floor. And it's about basically having their high expectations are around work expectations. So the way we approach this is that we have 3 phases of our projects. We have one that's controlled by our teachers. We then have the project qualification itself, and then we have something called pitch to progression. The projects that we have control ourselves, you can see some examples here of, you know, Chris, our construction guy, taking people out, getting them to do some surveying, getting them to do some plotting and planning across the campus, making it into a real life target, you know, whether that might be looking at the carbon footprint across the college, through to sort of surveying what the ground looks like. Then on the right hand side, you can see this is actually a drawing from one of my students. Their creative prowess was amazing, but their confidence in their ability to write and everything like that was just on the floor. That particular card flew off the shelves. I had to print off a load more of them as well. And that student, the beam on their face when they realized that we looked at their profit margins, who got the most, who sold the most, the beam on their face was worth all the effort that went into that alone. What we also do is those real life projects. So some examples of projects that we've got students have created themselves. This is not ones that we've done. Is one student created a digital remote weather machine that could help to show the temperature for gardening and in garden houses. We also had a student who created a storybook that would help with student care patients who were struggling with loneliness, and looked at a nostalgia book for them to create out there. Just projects that just really resonated and were absolutely fantastic for us. I think in terms of where this goes next, is that one thing that we would say is that our destinations are hugely positive, whether that's in line with T levels at the moment, but our positive destinations from the transition program as a whole is hugely risen over the last couple of years, as we adopt the transition model for the whole of our T level 2 programs at the college itself. I think I am handing back to Matt.
Cheers, Rich. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? I think one of the things as well that you know, from the program, it's really worth saying about how it's created something different from school, so you're not repeating that school year. And Rich touched on there the idea of having a carousel diagnostic period right at the start of the course. That's, I guess, one of the new type of things that we've done with transition. So students come in and they get the opportunity to try out different transition threads. So although you might be that construction student, you also get to try out a engineering class, you get to try out a childcare class, you get to try out a digital class. And for some students, they might say, why on earth are you making me do this in my first week or two? I want to do construction. But for those students, actually, all it does is confirm they made the right choice. And then you do get some students which will actually want to change, say, okay, well, I came in to do construction, but actually it's engineering I like after having a taster of that. So it gives them an opportunity, as far as sort of making sure the right student is on the right course. That carousel at the start is very successful at making sure students stick and stay after that. And then at the other end of the study program, at the end of the year, Rich also mentioned the pitch to progress, which is another thing we do where students pitch to their T-level lecturers why they're ready for the course. And it's a really nice opportunity for the learner to recap what they've learned and how they've developed, and also sell themselves effectively in an interview style situation to their teacher. So there are a couple of really nice elements there. And I think with the NTOs, it's a great opportunity for your T-level teachers to step into a level 2 class and work with their potential students directly. So that level 2 student gets a feel of what they're aspiring to be on, and they get an idea of what the lectures are going to be like and what the teachers are like and so on. So it's part of really making them feel part of the T-level family really early on, even if things didn't work out at school. Question here, is it a tough one to sell? That's one you often hear, like if you're doing a design in a program and it's only got the Maths English Retake and an odd HPQ in it, and it's not full of GCSEs and qualifications, how on earth do you sell it, particularly to parents? How do they think it's a good idea? And I think when we started out, we did wonder whether it's going to be a difficult one to sell, but actually, it's not really. I think what we largely find is our transition students do tend to have a spiky profile. So if a student was absolutely utterly failed school completely, it's unlikely they'd be on a transition program. They would be on our sort of level 1.5 kind of rescue programs. But you would often find a student actually has this spiky profile. They already have a bunch of GCSEs, and they might have a couple of good ones, and they might have a handful of ones that are fairly poor. But it would be a student with no GCSEs wouldn't come onto the program anyway. And then it's about context. It's about, as Rich said, contextualizing the maths and English that they do, making the homeworks that they do relevant to their aspiring subject T-level theme, and so on. There are a number of things you can do that actually mean the program feels very valuable, and actually the amount of things that you learn to prepare you to be a student for it make it an easier thing to build in. Can I have the next slide, please, Abby? The other thing Rich mentioned briefly there, the Vesper system as well, which you may well already know. This is a system developed by Martin Griffin and Steve Oakes. Vesper, which is sort of broken down into these 5 component parts, but essentially what Vesper is it's about behaviors. It's about modeling student behaviors you'd like them to adopt. And the thing that we really like with Vesper is that there are a whole bunch of behaviors that very successful students all exhibit. So all of your A-star students, they all do these things, but it has nothing to do with what you know, and it has nothing to do with levels of intelligence or aptitude or whatever. It's just simply about how you operate and behaviors that you adopt as a student. And so students at any level can adopt these various Vesper behaviors. And the other good thing is when they start to change the behaviors to sort of Vesper type behaviors, the impact is almost instant, where they can see improvement happening very rapidly. So I would say basically the Vesper system largely mirrors a lot of the skills and confidence building and self-awareness and so on that you'd like to see in a T-level student. So for us, we find the Vesper system particularly handy. Okay, Abby, can I have the next slide, please? This is the last one here, and if you could give us another click. There's a bunch of lessons, basically the key things that we've learned so far. So if you're just starting on your building a transition system, I would say, here's a few experiences for us anyway along the way, and I think that we've learned. So obviously the first one, as I said before, look through a new lens at it. Do start with a blank sheet of paper. Think about what you'd like out the other end. What sort of student would you like at the other end of this? You have an opportunity to build a bespoke study program to suit your T-level programs. You can build it so you get delivered the student you want at the end. Attention is about competency for T-level. Remember, your transition program is not a sort of hoovering up rescue class for everybody. The point of the transition program is to prepare people for T-level. And as we know, T-levels are very specific. Yes, they're really hard. A lot of people think some of the content again is it's not uncommon to hear a teacher open a T-level spec and go, oh my word, that's like undergraduate level, this, that, or the other, blah, blah, blah. In reality, of course, once it's presented in context and in a real world example or via a case study, then you get that penny drop moment and they think, oh, actually, it all makes sense. It doesn't have to be that difficult. It certainly doesn't have to be undergraduate level. But focus your attention on the competency for T-level. So much about T-level is what a student can do and they're capable of doing. And it's equipping with the skills so they're able to go and research something independently, able to prepare themselves to answer a question and so on. The third one is teach them all the skills that you need them to have. That's an easy one to say, but actually Often you can have a program where you're setting people work to measure their knowledge. What do they know? But so much about T level is, yes, but what can you do as well? So I think it's building in those skill sets. You need them to be able to do loads of stuff. They need to be very comprehensively capable. And a lot of that, again, comes back to behaviors. Lesson 4, don't assume your staff can model, help them. I think people do need help to learn how to design a program like this. It's not necessarily easy for everybody. I quite enjoy designing programs. I know other people who can't stand it. So I think, and look at the team of people you have, look at the strengths that you have in your teams. And if people need training to help them learn how to model a course, then get them that training, because you need to give them the tools to be able to do what you need them to do. Where we've had real success in maths and English is our contextualization. That's been a huge result. So, for example, 17-year-olds retaking maths and English, I think the success rate nationally hovers around sort of 29-30% or something like that. And I think our maths and English tends to have around the sort of lower 70% success rate for retakes. And this is largely due to how we contextualize a lot of the content that we teach. And we teach what they actually need to learn to pass. So it's really thinking about how you're going to redo that maths and English with people. If you try to sit a student just through the GCSE again that they failed at school and they didn't like it and they just think they're getting kind of reheated food, it's simply not going to have the same impact than if you're trying to teach somebody trigonometry that in school they were thinking, when am I ever going to use this in the real world? But you're teaching it through them being out on the playing field, looking through a theodolite, trying to draw up a scale map of your site. They don't even realize they're doing trigonometry, to be honest, because it's all contextualized and it becomes an awful lot easier. So it's thinking of ways where you can make it relevant and meaningful once again. Use every vehicle to build confidence, set high expectations. I think that's, keep that at the forefront. And I would say the bottom one is like, yes, be brave and willing to change, but I would also add to that, you'll get the best out of it if you're willing to try new things. But I would also say you're in a position now where there are a lot of people out there who have experience in running transition programs now. And also there's an awful lot of help on tap from folks like our friends here from the AOC and so on. There are fantastic resources out there to help you design and build a program. So you shouldn't feel like you're designing it and doing it in isolation. I would say share, talk to people, take up the offers of help that are on hand, and that certainly helps ease the load, as it were. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, and I think we're probably pretty tight on time there now, Steve.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. We have run a little bit over time, but I will ask one question, just one question that came in to the both of you, Matt and Rich. And it is, what would you like to see included as part of the T-level transition program that isn't yet?
Gosh, that's a good question. That's a really good question,
isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we do, we often work beyond spec as a college. Yeah. So we often go working with employers, for example, and saying, this is what we're teaching this month. What else do you want us to do? Is there something else you'd like to teach us that isn't in the spec or isn't on the NTO or whatever? Because we can do that too. So I think we're often looking, we don't just teach to the spec. So we, obviously you have the framework, which is your kind of bedrock, if you like. But we don't let that kind of limit what we're able to do. So that's a really good question. What would we have that isn't already in there? Because I think we tend to naturally add things in. What do you think, Rich?
I think probably a bit of standardization around, we've mirrored some stuff that's very akin to the employer set project in T-levels, and whether there's something that can be created that's centrally sort of like passed down. If NTOs are becoming stronger and stronger in there, is that actually those NTOs and how we mirror that. Yeah, I think the employer set project is a really important and innovative way of assessing students summatively, but I think to introduce it to them earlier on might be a good way of doing it. Obviously, you have to water that down a little bit, maybe, but yeah, that would probably be my only thing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If anybody does have any further questions, you can still put them in the chat, and we'll put them to Rich and Matt afterwards, and send them through, and we send through the presentation and all the other associated resources. So if you could flick us on 2 slides, please, Abby. Great. Okay, and so I thought I'd just show you some of the events that we've got coming up over the next over this term. So next slide, please, Abby. And linking really, really well to what the guys just been talking about in terms of employer set project is technical focus groups that we have towards the back end of June and early July. So exams will be done. You'll have some free-ish time. We've got them all around the country. So how many of these are? 6 of these dotted around geographically. A couple of venues still to be confirmed, but talk to your advisor. I'm sure your advisor, you'll have probably received some correspondence already from Abby about this, but I really recommend joining one of the technical focus groups that are coming up soon. Next slide, please, Abby. So I wonder how many of you are podcast listeners, and I wonder how many of you have discovered the fantastic T-level and transition podcasts that the department commissioned us to produce. Abby, if you could just click onto the link, we could have a look at where they land. So I'll just show you quickly where they are on the Gov.dots side. So this is the sort of background to it. If you just scroll down to the bottom, so we've got to this episode 5. We've got 5 episodes, and thinking about what we're talking about today, information and advice to support T-level and T-level transition program students' progress to positive destinations. So that could be some really interesting stuff in there. But there's things from the beginning to the sort of end of how you design your program. So really useful things you can consume for your pleasure. If you're like me, I like to listen to podcasts on my run. That's where I do it. But you could also use them as a bit of CPD, I think. Encourage staff to listen, and then open some discussions around it. So yeah, just thought we'd link you to these podcasts. Really pleased with them, going down very, very well. Had some fantastic feedback. Okay, back to the slide deck, and then the next slide, please, Abby. Thanks. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session today. Thank you very much for your attendance. I'm sure you found it really interesting. Abby's going to launch a poll now, and once you complete that poll, if you could, you're free to leave, or if you want to ask any further questions of any of us here from AOC or from the department, or Matt or Rich, you can hang on for a little bit yet. But other than that, next slide, please. It's really that time for me to say cheerio to you, and I hope you've enjoyed this webinar, and we'll speak to you really soon. Feel free to ask away, Richard.
Oh, thank you. I just very, very quickly. First of all, I wondered if you could just pop the URL into the chat so I can copy and paste that into my documents for that podcast.
Certainly.
And the other one was it was a more of a technical question, maybe from your presenters. I don't know if they're still there. They kept on talking about HPQ specialism, and I couldn't for the life of me work out what the acronym was.
Hi, Richard. That's the higher project qualification. So you see a level 2 equivalency of like EPQ.
Oh, I see. Oh, so this is like that. This is what you were talking about, that personal project.
Yeah, the personal project itself has to be driven by the learner. So they come up with a proposal, and it's often, we steer that towards their employee, their preferred exit route in terms of the T level as well. And it provides a scope for us to be able to sort of look at a number of skills, but also for the learner to be able to take some ownership of that qualification and sort of to be able to move it forward as well in a framework that sort of makes sense as a project management tool.
Is that a genuine qualification, please, like the EPQ, or is it something which you've developed as your own college?
No, HPQ is we use AQA
Yes.
for the delivery. AQA, I think of cottoned on, and there's a few centres that use it now. I think, if I'm being honest, is that it was a bit clunky originally when we were using it, but they brought a number of sort of online systems that are going to hopefully make it a bit more streamlined for next year. The other option that you do have is that they have another qualification that sits underneath that called the foundation project qualification. In that one, slightly lower level, it's a level 1 qual, but it allows for students to be given a little bit more support and guidance on there as well.
When you're doing your course, you do actually supply them with a qualification, which is this HPQ, as well as all the other things that you've been talking about.
Yeah, as well as that very, very small BTEC. So most of our BTECs are around about 120 GLH. So it's probably the equivalency of a GCSE and a half.
So what I was looking for was, what I personally was looking at was something like, I got to get my names right. I'm looking at the BTEC award qualification as a very low level entry level it's level 2 BTEC for digital, and then I was going to use that and build around that my preparation for the T levels in digital. We're teaching digital at Shootsail. This is what I'm doing. So you're talking about the same sort of idea, are you not?
Yes. What I would say is that the award, I don't know we don't use BTEC for digital, but I think the award is quite a large qual. So what that would end up doing is eating away at your ability for creativity. But that's a provider of choice. We personally, for us, I think the creativity bit and the ability to sort of mold the NTOs and our forms of assessment that we use within the NTOs is actually really valuable for our particular context, our particular setting as well.
Right. And I just picked up now on the NTO part. That's national. Hold on, get this right. National technical outcomes.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly? I'm not aware of these things.
So the national technical outcomes is basically that came when in the first iteration is that transition was had fairly fluid in terms of the way in which it could be approached. Different people could do it with a non-qualification route, and some people could do it with a qualification in there. The feedback that came back was that the worry was that there was a lack of consistency across the country as we rolled this out further and further. So the NTOs were something that has been brought in and developed to provide a framework that we can then say, right, okay, well, we know that anybody who does a transition across the whole country is able to say, well, they've covered these key elements within there. Now, there's no summative assessment for them to complete, but you do need to be able to evidence that you've covered that content and formatively assessed it. And I think that's the key thing to remember, is that one of the attractions with this, we know this group of learners probably doesn't fit well with BTECs. You can hand in once and then maybe upgrade or resubmit once. Actually, you're able to do a lot of formative assessment, which is really helpful to be able to give feedback.
Right. I was one of the people who said I don't feel at all prepared, and I'm quite clearly I'm in that position. Who is the provider for the NTO? Where would I find that framework?
If you go onto the NTOs, if you type in NTOs to Google, I can't remember the website myself, but I type in NTOs to Google and you National Technical Outcomes, and you'll be able to find them, and you have the different substrates within them. So most of that have NTOs written that you can then refer to.
That's fine. That's perfectly adequate in terms of advice. Thank you so much.
I think one of the things that's worth considering as well, when we went to HPQ as a route, one of the things that's really nice about it is it's supposed to be an independent research project. So the learner has to learn how to manage their time effectively, research something, cherry pick all the kind of key facts out of what they're researching, and also go through a number of stages that are required for a research project, and then evidence what they found. And one of the things that we found is when we were looking at NTOs is the HPQ was quite a good vehicle for accounting for a lot of the elements of the NTO. So you could look at the national technical outcome and think, well, if a student does this, and this in their project, then they'll be able to evidence that they've done all those parts of the NTO. The NTO is really like a kind of mini content list for each theme of T-level. So if you have a digital student, if you're running digital, there'll be a digital NTO kind of document, and it outlines kind of the basic things that ideally they will experience. Now, you might find that your award in digital that you're thinking of doing will answer to a whole bunch of NTOs. But we found for us the flexibility of using an HPQ instead kind of suited our way of teaching better.
That's brilliant. I didn't even know they existed. So this is such a useful thing for me to discover. I do need to go away and actually find out, but incredibly useful. Thank you very much.
The link in. I put the link in.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much.
Not at all.
I'll say goodbye now, and just want to thank you. This was very, very useful.